Welcome to the Bryce Eddy Show. So today I am going to interview a guy that I absolutely love and adore, and that's Billboard Chris. He is one of the most, I think, hardworking heroes in the movement, working on behalf of the transgendered kids. And this guy is an absolute stud. I love him to death. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you so much, Bryce. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been on an interesting journey for more than 4 years, raising awareness about what I consider to be the greatest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history, the practice of giving kids puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries. And I would argue there's no such thing as a transgender child. These are just called girls and boys, and the positive message we should be sending is that they're perfect just as they are. But much of the population has been bamboozled into believing this lie that there's some alternate form of human called transgender. And that whole thing is a lie. It's no such thing. These are kids struggling with other mental health comorbidities, kids with autism, kids who maybe just defy stereotypes. And we should just, in my opinion, get away from this language completely and just call them what they are, which is girls and boys.
I love it. So, recently the AP, and I'm sure you followed this, released an article with some study that shows that it's less than 1,000 kids or something like that. That's, that have been on puberty blocker as children, right? What's your perspective on that? And my response is that okay, that's 968 too many. But I think it's funny because the left and the people that are promoting it are like, oh, you guys are idiots. See, it's not really a problem. And my thought is, it certainly is in those kids' lives.
Just one clinic alone in CHLA, the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, led by Johanna Olsen Kennedy, who's currently being sued. Just that one clinic sees more than 1,000 kids a year. We have actual numbers, and these aren't the complete numbers, but Reuters has reported on this previously. Do No Harm, a nonprofit composed of doctors who are lobbying in DC, they've compiled the numbers. The Manhattan Institute has compiled these numbers. It's easily tens of thousands of children who've been given puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. And we're talking about probably 20, 30, 40,000 who have received surgeries. Almost all of these are double mastectomies being done on girls as young as 12. And that's according to insurance data. These numbers are all according to insurance data. Anyone can look this up. It does not include places like Kaiser, though. It doesn't include Veterans Affairs Program. It doesn't include those who are using private pay or those who have used donor funds given to children's hospitals for these purposes. But easily tens of thousands, and according to the New York Times, 300,000 children between the age of 12 and 17, and this was a couple years ago, 300,000 diagnosed with gender dysphoria. That's just those with the official diagnosis for insurance purposes.
So where are they getting this, small little number from? Are they just, out and out lying for propaganda purposes?
Yes.
Where are they reporting these numbers are coming from?
It's a great question, but they're just liars is what they are.
That doesn't sound
I don't have a better answer for you. They're just flat out lying. I mean, even Reuters, which is more left-leaning, reported the facts on this. There is no secret here. All these gender clinics have wait lists. My friend Jamie Reed worked at the gender clinic at the Missouri Children's Hospital at Washington University, and she saw herself more than 1,000 kids over 4 years, and that's at a relatively small clinic. In that region in the Midwest, Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago would be the big one, seeing most of the kids. But yeah, this is just a massive problem affecting children in virtually every school, and leftist media continue to lie about it.
Yeah, well, that doesn't sound like the leftist media I know, because I don't think they lie at all. I mean, I've been watching it for so long. No, I mean, it is absurd, and it's amazing the extent at which they will lie, while at the same time saying that this is the greatest thing, this is so important for these kids, and we must be doing this, and who are we to oppose it? I find that just incredibly absurd. I was interested to hear. I know you've got some things coming up, and I wanted to start with the lawsuit in Australia, because I watched that go down when they removed the post. I watched a little bit of the dust up, but bring us to that story. Tell us about what that post was, and Australia. I mean, these people are crazy. They are mad.
Yeah, people talk about Canada being this dystopian place. I live here in Canada. And yes, we have a lot of things to fix, but our cities are still beautiful and clean, and the crime is still relatively low, and it's not as bad as everyone thinks. I say whatever I want, wherever I want, and I'm staying out of prison. But places like England, Australia, New Zealand, I'd be in prison for sure. And what happened in Australia is they have this trans-identified female. So this is a woman who's, of course, on testosterone. She's had a double mastectomy, all that. She runs one of their TQ organizations called ACON. She's the vice president of the Australian Professional Association for Transgender Health. And she's constantly posting on social media just very degenerate stuff. I don't want to get into it all. It's not appropriate for a podcast to talk about. She says trans-identified people have better sex when they're high on illicit drugs. She says kids should all be receiving government-funded puberty blockers, etc. And what happened was she was appointed naturally to a panel of 20 so-called experts at the World Health Organization, tasked with writing healthcare policy for kids and adults struggling with trans identification. The Daily Mail from the UK ran an article talking about all of the awful things she's posted. And it had a picture of her with her mutilated body, and it had a picture of a dog performing an act on a man. This was a picture that she had tweeted out or posted to her own social media. So it went into all, this article goes into all the things that she's posted about. And so I just wrote a post saying, this woman, yes, she's female, because people get confused because she has a beard and everything, has been appointed to this panel of experts at the WHO. And I wrote, people who belong in psychiatric wards are writing the policy for people who belong in psychiatric wards. And that's not to say all people struggling with trans identification belong in a psychiatric ward. This is a psychiatric disorder. This is listed in the manual, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Disorders. And these people need help, not harm. But apparently I'm guilty of misgendering her because I called a woman a woman. Teddy Cook, according to FOIA documents, was complaining about the pictures that were attached to this Daily Mail article. These weren't my pictures. These were part of the Daily Mail article. She didn't even complain about my wording. But in the great country of Australia, they have a bureaucrat named the E-Safety Commissioner. She has a $45 million budget per year. Her name's Julia McGrant. She's actually American. She's spoken at the World Economic Forum saying we need to recalibrate what freedom of speech means. I don't know what she means by that, but it's obviously not good. But her job in Australia is to determine what Australians can see and say on the internet. So on their own, they ordered X to take down my post. X forwarded me the legal takedown notice. I'd forgotten I'd even tweeted this thing. It was about a month before. And so, of course, for me, this is a great gift. Thank you so much for the publicity, raising awareness about this child abuse, but also raising awareness about your censorship going on in Australia. So right now, currently, that post cannot be seen by any Australians. X geo-blocked it down there, complying with their legal order, but they refused to take it down. So I filed an appeal with their tribunal down there. Then Elon also filed an appeal, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is.
So it's technically two separate cases. Being heard as one, though. It's all being compiled into one court case. We have 5 days of court scheduled for this single post of mine. They've hired experts. I have all these expert reports that are about 60 pages long, detailing all the harm that my post caused. Let's not talk about all the harm being done to kids who are having body parts cut off and who are being sterilized and turned into anorgasmic lifelong pharmaceutical patients. But let's pretend this Canadian guy is harming Australian citizens by calling them by their sex. It's totally madness. But anyway, we've got 5 days of trial. That's going to be at the end of March into April. That's pretty big news. I love this because whether we win or lose, that's not what's important to me. It's a win just generating all this media, because my goal is to start conversations. This is going to start a million more conversations down there. It's going to start conversations all around the globe, especially because Elon's involved. And even if we lose, we'll probably take it to the high court, which would probably be even in a better situation, because then we generate even more media that way. But I'm very excited about that. I'm going to the World Economic Forum in a week from now. That'll be fun as well, talking with world leaders and business leaders and all sorts of people outside the main gate there. So we'll see what happens, but I just keep going one day after another trying to start conversations about this.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the work that you're doing, man, and you have been pretty tireless in it. One thing that I wanted to remark on is, remember in the Will, aka Leah Thomas thing with Riley Gaines, the media protects these people who are total sexual degenerates. Now, maybe they aren't all, and I'm not suggesting that they are all sexual degenerates, but there's definitely something wrong. And when I had Riley on back when this story was blowing up, one of the things that she revealed on my show was what Will and his boyfriend were doing in terms of just the posts that they were making, things. I mean, these are people that eventually put their balls, in a jar of formaldehyde on their mantle and had a room that was essentially a sex toy dungeon. And, and they were flagrantly posting these things while the media was suggesting that, Leah Thomas just wants to be able to live as herself and, and be free from hate and all this. So they're suppressing the truth that there's something wrong with these folks. And again, like you're saying, it is a mental disorder if you believe you're another sex or in the wrong body, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Most of these kids, though, in what I've seen, even raising my own children, are going through a difficult time. Many of them, as we know, have been on the spectrum. They feel isolated. There's all kinds of a host of other issues, and they're being almost handed this as, well, maybe this is the solution for you. And we've seen that in these reports as to how it's gone with the detransitioners and the people who have been heroes coming out of that movement and kind of revealing the truth. But what is so wicked is the complicit behavior with the media, where they're just ignoring things like this, woman down there in Australia who, she is a deviant. She is a degenerate. And we know that just based on her own behavior and her own posts, and they will run interference for it. And it makes me sick.
Yeah, she's posting about trans orgies and all sorts of stuff. So it's important when we talk about this whole trans issue to identify the differences within this, because this is really an umbrella term for a variety of different conditions going on here.
That's right.
Gender ideology itself falls under queer theory, which essentially wants to destroy all norms in society. Now you have these kids who are struggling, mostly girls today, mostly girls with autism, who have suffered sexual abuse, who have some sort of trauma, kids who are in foster care. It's just all the troubled kids. We all know what sort of kids we're talking about here. And this is coming along and being presented as the solution for all of their problems. So when these kids show up at the gender clinic, they're not being treated for their borderline personality disorder. They're not being treated for their depression, for their eating disorder, for whatever's going on. They're not being treated for the trauma. They're being taught that gender is the source of all their problems, which is obviously a lie. Then you have these adult males who transition, like Bruce Jenner. This is totally different. This is a sexual fetish for most of these men, not all of them, but most of them. It's a fetish called autogynephilia. Literally means attraction to oneself as a woman. So this is a sexual thing for them, where they dress up in women's clothes. They get a thrill from going out in public as a woman. This has nothing to do with the issue affecting kids.
That's right.
But the media wants to treat them all as though they're trans. No, this is a man with a fetish wearing a dress going outside. That's all it is. We should not celebrate this. That belongs in the closet, honestly. You don't need to bring your fetish and parade it out for all of society. And then you get some people who would just grow up to be gay, or who are gay and are very confused and are struggling. So there's these different things going on here. My focus is, of course, on the kids.
Right. Amen.
But yes, the media wants to present this as some progressive movement. The left doesn't want a revolution. They want to be in a state of perpetual revolution. And since the 60s, starting with the sexual revolution, we've had one continual civil rights movement after another. And when gay rights were won, the next thing on this slippery slope was turning so-called trans rights into a civil rights movement. Big mistake. You're sterilizing kids. That's not a civil right. Kids have the human right to grow up with their bodies intact. And all of this is based on a lie. People are gay. People are same-sex attracted. Nobody is trans. This whole thing is a lie.
In your opinion, why do they want a perpetual revolution? And I have my own thoughts.
Oh boy. I mean, this is a very long question for another day. We can get into all sorts of things. A lot of these people are literal communists. They just hate the Western world. They hate order. They hate discipline. They hate structure. They hate what is good. We are talking about a movement of evil. There is such a thing as good and evil in this world.
That's right.
And when you want to tear down everything that is good and normal in society and replace it with disorder, with chaos, honestly, this is like a spiritual battle of good versus evil.
Amen.
And I had seen our society spiraling downwards for quite a long time. I used to have a real job. I was a financial advisor. And I've done what all perfectly normal people do. And I quit my job as a financial advisor. And I stand on the street getting yelled at and screamed at and punched by Antifa. But most of the time, I'm having nice conversations with perfectly normal people who don't understand anything about this. And they're very supportive. So I felt we had to get out of our echo chambers online and get out into the real world. And it's been very successful. But yeah, I think this is just good versus evil in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I'm coming from a Christian perspective on that, and I do believe that it is a spiritual battle, and that's what we're fighting, and that's why they want chaos, and they want to destroy things because they want to remake it in their own evil image. And in order to do that, you must destroy the foundations of the West, which are Judeo-Christian. And yeah, I find it interesting right now, and I'm wanting to get your perspective on this. I do think that a significant tide is turning, and guys like you have had no small part in it. I mean, you have raised awareness. I mean, watching your videos, you see countless people really who have kind of had their head in the sand, or they just haven't been paying attention to what's going on, walking by you and engaging you in conversation, and the stuff that you revealed to them. I mean, I've seen their minds get blown just listening to the great evil that's kind of been foisted on us. And you do a good job of really laying out the scope of it and what's been happening and what you've been seeing. And so I admire you so much for that. Do you think, though, that the tide is turning? Do you have some optimism? Because I think it has switched pretty quickly here, and we're seeing us be on the verge of something entirely new.
Yeah, I think this is probably where conservatives or just plain old-fashioned truth tellers have had more success than in anything in this cultural rot that's been going on for decades. We're having tons of success. We have 26 states now that have legislated a stop to the medicalization of kids. Not all of these bills are perfect. In Georgia, for example, they banned cross-sex hormones for kids, but not puberty blockers for some reason. So this next legislative session, they'll need to fix that. But half the states have basically put a stop to this. Some are extending the statute of limitations. We have other countries where it hasn't been the politicians, but it's been the medical bodies, after having conducted systematic reviews of all of the scientific literature, they found there is no evidence this is helping kids. They don't have evidence, period, for anything, because there's never been a clinical study. You can't actually do an ethical clinical study on this. You can't give some kids puberty blockers and some a placebo. You shouldn't be experimenting on children, period. And we shouldn't need a study to tell us that our children are beautiful just as they are and that we shouldn't sterilize them. But we've seen England, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, some other medical bodies, the Academy of Medicine in France, psychiatrist body in New Zealand and Australia, medical body in Germany going against their politicians has said we need to slow down. Same thing in Italy. And even in Canada now, one of our provinces, Alberta, the most conservative province, they've legislated a stop to this for under 16s. That's still not good enough. We shouldn't be sterilizing 16 and 17-year-olds. And we shouldn't be cutting off the breasts of 18 and 19-year-olds either, to be honest. These are kids who are struggling. They're young people. And doctors aren't order takers. They've sworn an oath to first do no harm. And they shouldn't just cut off someone's breast because they asked them to. But we are making huge progress on this. And I think it's also an opening for people to start questioning other beliefs that they've unwittingly fallen into. Because when all of society is lying about something so egregious as this, so awful, what else are they lying about?
Yeah.
So I think we're seeing a movement back towards common sense all across the Western world. And it helps that we have X as a platform now to tell the truth.
Yeah,
because all of our media companies and all of our social media companies, barring X, have been on the side of this trans activism and other madness.
Yeah, no, they've been supporting it, and like I said earlier, running interference. Yeah, I do believe it's a focal point, and again, brother, I am so encouraged by what you've done, and the work you've done has been massively impactful. I think you're one of the true heroes in this movement, along with guys like Matt Walsh and others. Speaking of which, the Daily Wire just picked up Identity Crisis, which was a TPUSA and Daily Wire production. I happened to be in it, and I got to participate in this, but it was filmed a year and a half or so ago. At least my part was, and so I totally forgot about it. And it was played at opening night for Amfest, and it wasn't until I looked up and heard my voice that I noticed that this thing was coming out. But I haven't watched it yet because I hate to even see a snippet of myself in anything. But I've heard from some friends that it's good, and they really have highlighted so many of those heartbreaking stories of the detransitioners and how parents got manipulated into this, into supporting these things, and being told, as you and I have reported over the years, that do you want a dead daughter or a living son, kind of evil manipulation by these doctors. And this butchery, I think, is going to continue to be highlighted for the barbaric evil that it is. And again, you're one of the heroes in it.
Yeah, I'm very glad they're focusing on these detransitioners because you can tell people data all day long, but people react to stories in
Yeah.
business, in sales, in anything. It's all about the stories. And the left is really good at using these stories. And we're going to see this in the coming months when deportations start. They're going to focus on 2 or 3 stories that just tug at people's heartstrings. And that's how they're going to try to turn voters against the Republicans and against sensible immigration policy. But we have to do the same. We need to tell the stories of these young people who've been harmed because people don't believe it's happening. I was at UCLA a couple months ago. I was in town for I was going to be with PragerU in their studio and out on the street. And the night before, I thought, let's pop over to UCLA. And I got there. I was only there 2 or 3 minutes. Ben Shapiro happened to be holding an event, which I didn't even know about.
Oh, wow.
But I set up my tripod with my phone on it. I'm just on my own. And within 2 minutes, this young woman named Clementine walked up to me. And she's just turned 20. But when she was 12, well, let's back up. She'd suffered sexual abuse as a young child, I think 7 years old,
Ugh.
for a while. And at 12, she was struggling. She was taken to the gender clinic after her school counselor convinced her maybe she was trans just because she wasn't looking forward to becoming a woman. Well, yeah, no shocker there. She didn't want to be a woman because being female was the source of all this terrible trauma and abuse.
Yeah.
But the school counselor convinced her she was trans. The parents did what they thought was a smart thing, and they took her to the gender clinic to see a doctor, Johanna Olsen Kennedy, who on the very first meeting in half an hour prescribed puberty blockers, separated the daughter from her parents, and told the parents they could have a dead daughter or a live son. So she started puberty blockers at 12. Then at 13, the doctor convinced Clementine to go on testosterone because other boys at school were going through puberty. And she told her, you don't want to fall behind, do you? So she put her on testosterone. At 14, also at the doctor's urging, she got a double mastectomy because Johanna Olsen Kennedy told her it would be easier to do as a child and the results would be better than if she waited until she was an adult. The testosterone caused psychosis. She eventually went off it at 17. She officially detransitioned at 19. But now she's suing, and this is a huge deal. She's suing Johanna Olsen Kennedy. She's suing her surgeon, Scott Mosser. She's suing the hospitals. She's suing this other therapist, not the school
Good.
counselor, but a different therapist. And I think these lawsuits are what's going to help to bring this down because the insurance companies who have to pay up, they're going to look at this and say, well, we've got hundreds of doctors doing this. All these lawsuits are flying now. We don't like the liability. We're not going to insure it anymore. So I think that's probably going to be the way a lot of this comes crashing down. But it's important to tell her story. And it was such a powerful 6 minutes that I had talking to her. Elon Musk ended up retweeting it because people don't believe these things are happening. Yet here's a young woman right in front of me who we can see has been through all this. We can hear it in her voice. And people can't hide from the truth anymore.
Yeah, that's a powerful, powerful story. So, when you go out, I know you get some of these powerful stories. You get people who've shared, what's happened to them. You've opened people's eyes, but you get so much hate too, and you get violence, and people are spitting on you. I watched the one from just over the holidays where that bartender came at you, and terrible fighter, by the way. I mean, that guy that guy did not know how to throw a punch, and it was laughable being a fighter watching him. But I'm so blown away by guys like that, and whatever animates them, other than, again, maybe the demonic spirits. But you've handled that well. You can take a punch. I know you've taken many. How do you not? Because you look like a guy. You're Canadian. I mean, you guys are brawlers a little bit in your DNA.
I should pull his sweater over his head and start hammering away, right?
Yeah. How have you not, with a guy like that? That guy would have been not too hard to beat down in your defense.
Well, I mean, it's hard to throw an uppercut when you got a sign in front of you, right?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But I was actually disappointed in myself there because I swore, and it's the first time I've sworn on camera. But I was getting punches thrown in my head, so I guess it's a little understandable.
I give you a pass, Chris.
But I've had my arm broken before, and I haven't even said a word. But this is a long story. I mean, first of all, I don't want to be out there scrapping in the street. That's not how you win hearts and minds. That's not a good look.
Correct.
It's much more effective to just take the violence, to be peaceful. That's way more powerful than knocking somebody out on the street. But I specifically vowed not to fight back. And I did fight back a little. My phone had gone flying, and he was throwing. So I think I threw a couple. Although, honestly, my memory's a little hazy. You probably know what I'm talking about in those moments. You don't have good recall.
Yeah.
But what happened? 2020. In December of 2020, I was sucker punched from behind, and it dazed me for 6 or 7 seconds. I honestly had this flashbacks when I was in grade 8, and this boy named Peter Puaga sucker punched me in the hallway. My brain went straight to that. And then I kind of came to, and I didn't even know who had hit me. And these young guys downtown, I'm in a very busy location. These young guys pointed this guy out. And so I went to get his picture, and he ran. And I thought, not today. I'm tired of taking all this abuse. Especially back then, I was taking tons, but it continues. And I chased after him. We are allowed to do citizens arrests in Canada. And I got my signs on. The sign behind me is flying behind me like a cape. And I caught this guy pretty quick because he's not in good shape. And I didn't want to hurt him because I know how it is. Police want to arrest me for anything.
That's right.
I've been arrested a couple times. And so I just pushed him up against a wall. And I bounced him off this wall, and he fell down. And then I walked away to de-escalate. I did everything right. I waited for police to arrive. I got arrested anyway. But then I got released. I got booked and everything, fingerprinted. I was sitting in my cell. I hadn't even sat down yet. I was eating a granola bar they gave me. And the cell door opened back up. And the police said they were letting me go because they'd reviewed footage, and this guy admitted to sucker punching me. So I thought, okay, that's great. A couple months later, I get a phone call from the Vancouver PD, who have been terrible in multiple incidents.
Yeah.
They want me to come in to give a statement because they're looking at charging me with assault causing bodily harm. Not charging him. They wanted to charge me. So I talked to a lawyer. He said, do not talk to them. They're just trying to build a case. But that freaked me out because I don't want to get some criminal record because I'm literally defending myself or stopping someone from fleeing the scene of a crime, as is my right. So I vowed then and there I'm never touching anyone again. A week later, I was in Montreal. I got attacked by 6 people on the street, Antifa. Got my arm broken by a pylon. Took a whole bunch of punches. Didn't even say a word. Police refused to investigate. But that's just the way it is in Canada. They're looking to get me because these crown prosecutors are woke, like your state prosecutor. We call them crown prosecutors.
Mm-hmm.
And the people running the Vancouver police force, I don't think are in my favor either. There are, of course, many individual police officers who I've heard support from. They're not a monolith. These are all individual people.
Yeah.
But I've got to be careful, especially in Canada. So I just vowed I'm never going to fight back. So I just take it. And to be honest with you, Bryce, as you mentioned about his fighting ability, these aren't normally people I need to worry about at all.
No, it's true. And no, I think you're wise. I think you've taken the right approach. I think it has been far more effective than fighting back. But what you answered is what I wanted to know. How have you been able to restrain yourself? And it shows a lot in your character. because it would be pretty tough for me, again, being a lifelong fighter and martial artist, not to not to give that guy just a little bit of extra, laying of holy hands. So I think you're commendable in that, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, that's instinct for you. For me, my tripod broke apart. I still got these pieces in my hand.
Yeah,
I'm still holding my phone, trying to film it. Like, that's my instinct, is get this on camera and fend him off a little bit. But
well,
yeah, he wasn't too much to worry about. I hope he gets arrested. I was told he was going to be, but I haven't heard anything. So
yeah,
I'll
well,
probably phone the police right after this.
I saw, which was very encouraging to me, some, real quick internet justice. They found out who he was within moments, which was great. You had a whole, 100,000 people sleuthing it for you in seconds, and they uncovered where he worked. They applied pressure on the business. I'm not sure what went on from there, but I mean, it was swift. And
you know what happened there, Bryce?
Justice.
Someone reached out to me in a DM. A retired attorney and judge used facial recognition software to find this person. Another person also ended up sending me it. But it's a really funny message I have from this individual. They spend some of their time using their expertise to identify people calling for an intifada against the Jews. And this retired judge said they're personally responsible for many of these anti-Semites losing employment since October 7th. So that's a good person to have in my corner.
Yeah, amen. That's fantastic. No, I like that, and I think that's going to be turning more. And I've said this before, and I pray to God that we do not continue trending towards chaos and breakdown of our real justice system, and because at some point you will have a form of street justice, and that is the best version that it's taking, where people just en masse kind of investigate and start looking for this guy, and you get those direct messages from people who know how to do that stuff. And I do think that's a form that it will take. But if guys like him do not see justice for doing what they did and attacking you, at some point people will take that into their own hands. When the people are not getting what they want and this tide continues to turn, we're going into a interesting but sort of dangerous predicament in society. So it's going to be interesting to follow that and see how much more of those kind of things develop as our justice system fails and continues to prosecute us for defending ourselves and not go after the actual attackers.
Yeah, and it's a big problem in Canada because I have gotten one guy a criminal record, Jessica Yaniv, formerly Jonathan Yaniv.
Oh, is that one that was going around trying to get women to wax his balls at women's only clinics?
That's right. So
yeah,
in the city I live in, we have a large Indian community, large Sikh community, and a lot of these women work out of their homes as estheticians, servicing only women, for waxing and whatever. And he would call them up, and he called up some legit businesses as well, stating that he wanted his nether regions to be waxed. They don't provide that service to men. Instantly, he said he was being discriminated against based on his gender identity, and he took them to the Human Rights Tribunal. The Human Rights Tribunal heard 3 of the cases. He lost them all, actually.
Wow.
And he had to pay them each $2,000.
Good.
But he's just a giant menace. He called the police 2,000 times in 2 years. I know this because the police told me. And he came out on the street where I was one day. He actually was stalking me for about 3 days. But then he made a mistake. He threatened to kill me. And that's uttering threats. You're not allowed to do that. And the police are tired of this guy. So he ended up getting a criminal record. His 2 previous convictions, he'd been given a conditional discharge each time playing the trans card. But he finally got a criminal record. So he can't come to your beautiful country of America. You're welcome, Americans.
Yeah,
but
thank you for that.
Normally, nothing happens. I've had all sorts of assaults up in Canada. They either don't investigate or they do nothing, or the police do recommend charges, and then the Crown prosecutor says, no, we're not going to proceed with this charge, as happened just a couple months ago with a woman who threw coffee on me and tried to destroy my equipment. The Crown prosecutor refused to press charges.
So last question is specifically about Canada. So with Trudeau, departing, what what do you see? Are you optimistic that Canada will be following in our footsteps, and the tide turning up there?
Yeah, I've always been optimistic because ultimately it is the people who decide. I knew if we just created enough awareness about this that we would put a stop to it. It's still going to take some time, especially up here in Canada. But Trudeau is done. Of course, he's resigned. He was going to lose anyway.
Yeah.
The Liberal Party is done. They have absolutely no chance. It is a 100% guarantee that our next government will be the Conservatives. They will have a large majority, led by Pierre Poilievre.
Are
Now,
you
Pierre is
because he seems like he's pretty strong.
he's strong on he's pretty strong in interviews with communist reporters,
Mhm.
like his interview where he was eating that apple and he embarrassed that guy.
Yeah, that one was great.
Pierre does not talk about the cultural issues at all. Period. He's only mentioned puberty blockers, that term, once. He voted for a bill called Bill C4. It was previously called Bill C6, but that bill died when the last election happened. But he voted to make it a crime to help children feel comfortable with their sex. It's now conversion therapy. If your little girl says she's a boy, and you, Bryce, say, no, sweetheart, you're a girl, and no, you're not going to transition, and we're going to help you to feel comfortable as a girl, that's now deemed conversion therapy. And you can go to prison for 5 years.
Wow, terrible.
So that passed unanimously. All the Conservatives. It was actually a Conservative motion to fast track it through the House. And then they were all hugging and celebrating in the aisles with the leftist political parties. So the Conservative Party in Canada is more like the Democratic Party from 2010.
So they're just less left.
Yes, they are. The majority of Conservative voters in Canada, for example, would have voted for Kamala Harris. It's very different up here. Pierre is good on economic issues. He's a fiscal conservative for sure. He's going to be way better for the country. But he doesn't want to touch these cultural issues. He doesn't want to touch the trans issue. He doesn't want to touch the immigration issue. I mean, they all now are getting on board with, yes, we've brought in too many immigrants. I mean, you guys think you have it bad in the US. You do have it worse in terms of illegal immigration. We have way more immigration per capita than you. It's almost double. The city I live in, close to 60% of its inhabitants were not even born in this country.
Wow.
And it's a large Sikh community, and they're beautiful people.
Yeah, they are.
But you just can't absorb that many people and expect the rest of your society to function properly. Rents are through the roof. Housing prices are through the roof. Young people have almost no chance of ever buying a home. My home is just a pretty basic home. Like, it's a normal home.
Yeah.
Out in the suburbs. But you can't find a home anywhere within an hour of Vancouver for less than $1.5 million.
Wow.
It's insane. So something has to give there. But when politicians are courting the votes of these different immigrant communities, they're not really going to be one to stop the mass immigration happening. But whatever happens, Pierre is going to be light years ahead of everything that Justin Trudeau was doing.
Well, then I'm happy for that. It's going to be interesting to see if you guys are able to, continue to turn that tide on the social issues. But if anybody can do it, it's guys like you and keeping that pressure up, and that's what I'll pray for. So I'm excited to get your reports and get your footage and everything from the World Economic Forum, and pray for your safety and all of that. But yeah, keep me apprised of what's happening. And again, I know we'll see all the great footage that you post.
You got it, Bryce. I'm gonna have fun there. It's gonna be great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, why don't you plug where we follow you and where we pay attention to all those videos?
Sure. Almost everything I post is on X. I do have Instagram as well, and YouTube now. The handle is the same, at Billboard Chris. People can support me through my website, billboardchris.com. But really, I just want people to learn all about this, get up to speed about it, and have these conversations, because that's how we change the culture. The politicians don't change it, we do, and we're going to keep doing it.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate you coming on. For my listeners and viewers, hey, we started a new YouTube channel, The Bryce Eddy Show. And I would love if you went on there and subscribed to us. Our last channel got disappeared a few years ago. The tides changed a little bit, and we know what not to highlight in our YouTube presence. But really appreciate you going there and subscribing for us. Also, go to bryceeddy.com to subscribe to our newsletter and keep apprised of what we're doing. Bryce Eddy 1 on Twitter and Super Bryce Eddy on Instagram. All right, to God be the glory, and we are out. Hey, thank you for watching or listening to this show. If you are someone who listens to us on the podcast apps, please go to our Rumble channel. Even if you're not going to watch us there, we'd appreciate you hitting subscribe. We want to boost those numbers up and make sure that that channel continues to grow. But again, thank you so much for listening to us.